They say every house keeps its own memories, some echo with laughter, others with the sound of things best forgotten. But there's one house, standing alone on a hill in northern Virginia, whose silence feels alive. People who've gone near it say it breathes, not with wind or life, but with memory, the kind that clings to walls and whispers when you think you're alone. It was built in 1849 by a man named Elias Harrow, a name most of America never knew, and for good reason. On paper, he was a respected landowner, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, and a devoted husband. But history, when you dig deep enough, tells a different story. Beneath the wood and brick of that home lies the legacy of a family that tried to bury its sins and failed. The locals called it the House of Secrets, not because of what they saw, but because of what they heard. Doors opening when the house was empty. Footsteps in rooms sealed shut for decades. Letters hidden behind wallpaper, written by hands that shook with fear. And yet, every time someone tried to uncover the truth, something drove them away. Not a ghost, not a curse, something worse. For generations, the Harrow family guarded their storied. Every diary destroyed, every photograph burned, every mention erased from local records. But one line survived, scratched into the underside of an attic beam by someone who knew the truth was slipping away. It said, "We are not who we say we are. The blood remembers." Tonight, we open that attic door, and for the next 25 minutes, you'll hear what no historian was ever meant to tell. The secret that rotted this family from within, and how their name, their home, and their blood became one of the darkest stains in American history. If you listen closely, you might still hear them, the ones who tried to warn us. This isn't a ghost story. It's a confession carved into wood, buried in blood, and sealed beneath a house that refuses to die. Because some families were never meant to be remembered. When Elias Harrow returned from war, he brought back more than medals. His neighbors said he'd changed, not in the way soldiers often do, but deeper. There was something hollow behind his eyes, like he'd seen something he couldn't name. He bought a stretch of land outside a small Virginia town where the soil was dark and damp, perfect for tobacco. But the land had history. Long before Elias claimed it, it belonged to a plantation family wiped out by fire in 1823. Some said the fire wasn't an accident. Others said it was punishment. Elias ignored the warnings. He built his home on those ashes. A towering wooden house with 13 rooms, each with a window facing the same direction, west. Toward the dying sun, he said it reminded him that everything ends. His wife, Margaret, was known for her silence. She rarely left the property, and when she did, she kept her face covered with a veil. The townsfolk whispered that she was ill, that she couldn't bear the daylight. But the truth came later, in the diaries of a housemaid who disappeared one winter without a trace. Her final entry read, "Mrs. Harrow talks to the mirrors again. Says she sees a woman who isn't her. Says the house keeps her reflection when she leaves the room." The Harrows had 2 children, Samuel and Eliza, though no one in town ever saw them together. The boy was always pale, withdrawn, while the girl was kept away entirely. It wasn't until years later that a census taker noted something strange. 2 children were listed as born in the same year, only months apart. And yet Margaret Harrow was said to have given birth once. By the 1860s, the Civil War reached Virginia, and the Harrow estate became a refuge for deserters and drifters. But none stayed long. One soldier, who camped in the fields nearby, wrote in his journal, "That house ain't right. The lights burn all night, but there's no one moving inside. You hear music, but no voices." Then, in 1865, the house went dark. No lights, no voices, no one seen coming or going. For decades afterward, the property passed from one silent heir to another, each living shorter lives than the last. The official record says the Harrow bloodline ended in 1921. But when local authorities searched the property, they found something sealed behind a wall in the basement. Something that suggested the Harrows never really left. The basement was sealed with iron nails so old they'd fused into the wood. It took 3 men to break through, and when they did, the smell was the first thing that hit them. Not decay, but something sweeter, like rotting fruit. Inside was a small room no larger than a closet, lined with old portraits turned to face the wall. There was a table, a single chair, and a glass jar sitting at the center. Inside that jar was a folded piece of paper, aged and brittle. The note was signed E.H., the initials of Elias Harrow. It read, "The sin is not in what we've done, but in who we are." The child is both gift and curse. May no one repeat our name. The investigators assumed it was religious rambling, the kind you see from families driven mad by isolation. But one of the portraits, when turned around, revealed something that changed everything. It wasn't a painting of Margaret or Elias. It was of a young girl, no older than 10, painted twice, side by side, one version with dark hair, one with light, both wearing the same dress. The artist had signed it only with a symbol, 2 interlocking rings. Years later, when the descendants of the Harrow estate tried to auction what was left, historians noticed that symbol again, carved into the backs of furniture, etched into the wood of the banister, even stitched into the curtains. Always the same 2 rings. And when one genealogist traced the Harrow family tree, he found that the loops matched the family lines themselves, intertwined where they never should have been. That's when whispers of the union began, a rumor that Elias's wife was not who she claimed to be. Some said she was his cousin, others that she was his sister. But the most disturbing theory, the one historians tried to suppress, was that Margaret wasn't born at all, she was made. The Harrow family had a fascination with lineage, with purity, preservation, and the idea that blood could be perfected. Elias was known to study anatomy and medicine in private. Letters found in an attic trunk showed correspondence with a doctor in New Orleans who specialized in selective reproduction. The doctor's notes referred to the Harrow experiment, a project meant to preserve genius through duplication. And so the story changed, from a family haunted by ghosts to a family haunted by themselves. Because what Elias brought home from the war wasn't trauma, it was an idea, one that would turn his house into a laboratory of flesh and blood. For decades, the Harrow experiment was dismissed as myth, the kind of rural folklore that grows out of decay and isolation. But in 1978, a team of preservationists cataloging Civil War sites stumbled upon the house again. By then, it was barely standing. The roof had collapsed, ivy had swallowed most of the exterior, and the walls bowed inward, as if the house were trying to consume itself. But what they found inside was not the ruin of a family home. It was evidence of obsession. Every surface was carved with handwriting, dates, initials, equations, even Bible verses rewritten backward. The floorboards in the study were pried up, revealing small boxes filled with locks of hair, bone fragments, and teeth labeled with names that matched no public records. One of the boxes bore the initials SH and contained 2 sets of teeth. One from a child, one from an adult, fused together at the root. At first, the researchers believed it was a private burial ritual or a medical curiosity. But among the papers in Elias's desk, there was a letter to his son, Samuel. It said, "When the blood turns on itself, it remembers the origin. Never let it mix beyond the circle." That phrase, "beyond the circle," became the key to understanding what the Harrows had done. Using DNA testing on the remains found beneath the cellar, scientists discovered that several generations of Harrows shared genetic markers identical enough to suggest something unthinkable. The Harrows hadn't merely intermarried. They had repeated their bloodlines deliberately. Birth records were falsified. Names were recycled. Husbands and wives disappeared into illness, only for new family members to appear with eerily similar faces and the same middle initials. The Harrow lineage was a spiral, not a tree. And at its center was Elias, whose own blood connected to almost every child born on that land for nearly 80 years. But here's where the story twists into something deeper. One of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Marsh, began to experience strange phenomena after handling the artifacts. She wrote in her journal that she would dream of the house as it once was, bright, pristine, and filled with laughter. Yet, in the reflection of every mirror, she saw the same face, pale, hollow-eyed, with blood on its hands. When she returned to the site a week later, she found new carvings on the walls, fresh wood shavings on the floor. The words were the same ones carved into the attic beam over a century ago. "We are not who we say we are." The blood remembers. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if this was your bloodline? Dr. Marsh never published her findings. Within months, she resigned from her post at the University of Richmond, claiming she'd lost the thread of time. Her colleagues said she'd become paranoid, always checking her reflection, keeping the lights off in her office, and refusing to enter rooms with mirrors. The official record says she moved west, changed her name, and lived quietly until her death. But there's one final entry in her private notebook, recovered after her estate sale in 1994. It reads, "The Harrow bloodline isn't extinct, it hides. It adapts. It remembers its pattern." That line sparked new investigations. A local historian named Thomas Keene began tracing descendants of those who'd lived near the Harrow property. What he found was unsettling. In several small towns across Virginia and Maryland, birth registries showed recurring features: identical names, matching birthmarks, similar handwriting, separated by generations. It was as though the same people were being born again under different surnames. Keene began to suspect the Harrow bloodline hadn't died but spread, diluted and hidden within other families. He called it the echo. In interviews, he described it as a pattern that couldn't be explained by coincidence or genetics alone. Those connected to the Harrows, even distantly, reported dreams of the house long before they'd ever heard of it. Some could describe the layout in perfect detail: the 13 rooms, the west, facing windows, the iron nails sealing the basement door. And the more they remembered, the sicker they became. Medical reports described unexplained anemia, fainting, hallucinations. One survivor said she woke to find her reflection smiling after she'd stopped. Another said she'd begun to speak in her sleep, in a voice that wasn't hers. When Keene visited the ruins himself, he recorded a single video. In it, he walks through the house, calling out to anyone who might be there. The footage is shaky, the audio barely clear, but one moment stands out. As he passes a cracked mirror, a faint whisper overlaps his voice. It's impossible to make out fully, but with enough amplification, a phrase emerges: "Don't let the circle close again." That video was uploaded in 2003 and has since vanished from the internet. Every reupload, every mirror copy, is eventually corrupted, replaced by static, as if the house refuses to be seen. And maybe that's the real warning. The Harrows built their legacy on secrecy, on keeping blood pure, memory intact. But the further we dig, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a family story. It's a contagion of identity, a pattern that survives by remembering itself through us. If you're still here, listening in the dark, ask yourself, what if your name was never really yours? By the early 2000s, the Harrow estate was nothing more than ruins, swallowed by the forest. Developers who purchased the land claimed it would be easy to clear, until the machines broke down one by one. Workers refused to return after nightfall, saying they heard someone knocking from beneath the ground. County records show that after only 6 weeks, the project was abandoned, the property sold again, this time to an anonymous buyer who paid in cash. The title simply listed the owner as E.H. Holdings. For years, nothing happened. The forest grew thicker, and locals stopped talking about the land altogether. Then, in 2014, a hiker reported finding what he called a new foundation. It wasn't new, though. It was old stone, polished clean, and placed precisely where the Harrow house once stood. Carved into the first step were the same 2 interlocking rings. When investigators arrived, they found no footprints, no tools, and no sign of recent construction. But the soil beneath the foundation was disturbed. And when they dug just 2 feet down, they uncovered small glass jars, identical to the ones found in the old basement, each filled with strands of hair, pressed flowers, and something that looked like ash. Each jar bore a label with a year written on it. The most recent was 2013. DNA analysis confirmed the impossible. The genetic material matched that of the Harrow family, the same markers that had supposedly ended nearly a century earlier. The scientists who ran the tests refused to publish their results, claiming the samples were contaminated. But one leaked photo from the lab showed something disturbing: a faint thumbprint on the glass jar, still fresh. That's when the rumors began again, of a secret group, descendants or believers, rebuilding the house room by room. Some said they were trying to resurrect the bloodline, to continue Elias's experiment. Others said they were trying to contain it, to seal it once and for all. No one knows for sure, because anyone who's gone searching for that site since has never found it in the same place twice. The GPS coordinates shift. The trees move, paths bend back on themselves. It's as if the land is alive, remembering, reorganizing, protecting something. One of the last letters Dr. Marsh wrote, now kept in the archives of the Virginia Historical Society, ends with a warning: when the circle closes, the blood calls home. Do not answer. Maybe the Harrow house isn't gone. Maybe it's waiting, for its family to return. And maybe, just maybe, some of us already have. They say history never truly dies, it just changes its name. And if the Harrow story teaches us anything, it's that some bloodlines don't fade quietly, they adapt, hiding inside the families that came after them. Generations forget, records vanish, but memory survives in strange ways. In 2021, a family living 30 miles from the old Harrow site reported hearing knocking inside their walls. At first, they blamed squirrels or bad plumbing. But then the knocking began to follow a pattern. 3 taps, then 2, then 1, always at midnight. When the husband finally tore open the drywall, he found something embedded deep within the studs, a rusted iron nail, bent into a perfect circle. DNA on the metal matched the same trace found in the 2013 jars, the Harrow signature. The family moved out within weeks. But the new owners reported the same thing. Not the knocking, but whispers. A woman's voice repeating a phrase too faint to fully catch, though one word was always clear: remember. Some claim that's all the Harrow legacy was ever about. Remembrance, a ritual of memory binding generations together through secrecy and blood. Others think it's punishment, that the house, the land, the entire lineage is caught in a loop, replaying its sins through those who try to uncover it. And maybe that's why the story still finds us. Why you're hearing this now? Because once you know their name, once you've pictured that house on the hill, something connects you to it, a thread stretching through time, pulling you closer. Every listener, every researcher, every descendant, all drawn back to the same whisper in the dark: the blood remembers. When the last Harrow home burned in 1921, firefighters swore they saw figures inside the flames, not screaming but watching, calm, waiting. The fire chief, years later on his deathbed, said he still dreamed of their faces. And in those dreams, they weren't trapped, they were home. Maybe that's where all of this leads. Not to answers, but to acknowledgement. That some stories were never meant to be solved, only carried. Because history isn't made of facts, it's made of memory, and memory has a pulse. So when you turn off this video tonight and your room goes silent, listen closely. If you hear tapping on your walls, or a whisper just beyond reach, don't respond. Don't ask who's there. Because the moment you do, you're part of the circle, and the blood remembers.